You're fired. Someone who can't even handle a business negotiation properly is useless to this company. Those words, thrown at me by my boss, Robert, hit me like a ton of bricks. I stood there frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Yes, I was late for an important business meeting, but that was because I stopped to help a little girl who had collapsed on the main street. However, Robert had no interest in hearing my explanation. And just like that, my career came to an abrupt end. I had poured my heart and soul into this company, and now the frustration and helplessness were suffocating me. As I stood there lost in my thoughts, my phone started buzzing like crazy. It was a call from the president, Ms. Reynolds. "Why didn't you show up for the meeting today?" "I'm sorry. Actually, I just got fired." "What? No way. I haven't heard anything about that." The silence on the other end of the line felt unbearably heavy. But little did I know that this call from Ms. Reynolds and the girl I had helped would change my life forever. My name is Michael. I work as an engineer and project planner at Westwood Technologies. Westwood Technologies specializes in technological development, handling everything from cutting-edge research to product commercialization and global distribution. I consult with clients on technology development and patent licensing, coordinating with our internal research teams to drive projects forward. That is my job. Since I was a kid, I've always had a strong desire to do something that helps others. That mindset was shaped by a particular experience I had in elementary school. One of my classmates suddenly fell seriously ill, and our entire class started thinking, is there anything we can do to help? We wrote get well letters and gathered messages of encouragement. Those were small things, but each action carried a deep sense of care for our struggling friend. That moment is still vivid in my memory. Thankfully, our friend recovered and came back to school. But the helplessness I felt watching from the sidelines and the realization that small acts of kindness can create a powerful impact have stayed with me ever since. That's why I strongly decided, this time it's my turn to help. Whether in school or in my professional life, I've always acted with the mindset of what can I do for the person in front of me? If I can ease someone's burden, even just a little, then that's the path I want to take. That's what drives me. I chose to work at this company because it provides the perfect environment to put that mindset into action. Here, the research and sales departments work closely together, allowing innovative ideas to be quickly turned into reality. Every day, I work with the hope of bringing this technology to people who need it, and that gives me more than enough sense of purpose and fulfillment. One day, I was called into the president's office where I faced the president, Ms. Catherine Reynolds. She was widely known as a beautiful president, and in person, she had a striking presence that turned heads wherever she went. But more than her appearance, it was her intense passion for work that set her apart. Her speed in generating ideas and making decisions is exceptional, and she's incredibly considerate toward both her employees and business partners. She has this unexplainable charisma that makes people think, I want to follow her. On top of that, as the second-generation president, she is constantly striving to expand the company her predecessor built. She's friendly and approachable to everyone, and rather than having people call her Ms. Reynolds, she prefers to be called Catherine. The employees naturally follow suit, addressing her with both familiarity and respect. At that moment, Catherine looked straight at me. My heart skipped a beat. "Michael, the project you proposed the other day was truly outstanding." As Catherine said that, she stepped forward smoothly, closing the distance between us. Your creativity and initiative are invaluable assets to this company, and actually, we have a huge business deal coming up next month that I need you to take the lead on. A joint team of overseas investors and major manufacturers looking for new technology in the medical field has shown strong interest in our monitoring device. And if we secure this contract, our revenue will skyrocket, allowing us to invest heavily in new technological advancements and provide products that help even more people. As she spoke, she locked eyes with me. There was no room to look away, so her seriousness and expectations came through loud and clear. So, the prototype monitoring device our research team developed, our clients are interested in that. That makes sense. It allows real-time measurements without burdening the patient. It seems to align perfectly with their needs. As I responded, Catherine's smile deepened slightly. Exactly. They're also considering expanding this technology across Asia and into Western markets. For us, this means we can secure funding while accelerating development. Michael, I believe you're the only one who can successfully bring this deal together. I'm really counting on you. Oh, thank you. I'll do everything I can to meet your expectations. As I said that, she lightly touched my arm and smiled. Thank you, I really appreciate it. That small, natural gesture made my heartbeat quicken just a little. But more than that, a powerful determination surged within me. I will deliver results and support Catherine no matter what. As I stepped out of the president's office and let out a deep breath, a cold voice called out to me, "Hey." It was Robert. He joined the company a few years ago after leaving a foreign corporation. There were rumors within the company that he was highly skilled, but in reality, he always spoke in a sharp and abrasive manner. You seem to have gotten quite close to Catherine, haven't you? He was tall, impeccably dressed in a sharp suit, but his eyes were like those of a predator stalking its prey. It's not like that at all. Humph. If you have time to smile, use it to work. Taking the research team's ideas and pushing projects forward on your own. That just proves you don't understand the company's policies. Know your place. That remark made my blood boil. Sure, I often checked in with the research department and exchanged ideas with them, but Catherine encouraged a hands-on approach, so I wasn't acting on my own. From Robert's perspective, though, he was a newly appointed department head trying to establish his position, and I, Catherine's so-called favorite, was probably an eyesore to him. Despite these thoughts, a few days later, I took a new project proposal developed in collaboration with the research team to Robert's office. The plan was to launch a joint project with investors to introduce new medical technology early. Catherine had even said, "This is an interesting idea," so I had some expectations. However, Robert barely skimmed through the proposal before slamming it onto the table dismissively. "What is this? Your cost and risk estimates are too optimistic, and the implementation process is way too vague. Do you really think a company of our size can pull off some dream project like this?" No, of course, I've accounted for the workload and budget, and I plan to fine-tune the details through discussions with the stakeholders. Fine-tune? You think you can involve Ms. Reynolds at such an early stage? Still, if we introduce this technology, it could open up new avenues in the medical industry and enhance the company's reputation. Listen, when I say no, it's a no. This is rejected. Don't ever bring me another useless proposal like this again. With those cold words, Robert shoved the proposal back at me. I stood there, frozen, unable to even say, "Excuse me," as he walked away from his desk without a second glance. I thought this was a solid idea, but he shot it down so easily. And honestly, who really doesn't understand the company's direction here? Frustration and helplessness churned inside me, refusing to settle. A few days later, I was on my way to the crucial business meeting Catherine had entrusted me with. She had told me, "I'm counting on you," so I was determined to make it a success. Wanting to arrive early and prepare before our clients did, I left the office ahead of schedule and was walking down the main street when I spotted a little girl collapsed on the pavement. She was hunched over, struggling to breathe. Yet, no one around her stopped. Perhaps they were in a hurry. They only cast a brief, indifferent glance at her before continuing on their way. "Are you okay? What's wrong?" I rushed over, and she clutched her chest, letting out a pained whimper. I quickly helped her to a nearby bench, gave her some water from a bottle, and encouraged her to take deep breaths. After a while, her breathing gradually stabilized. "Thank you, sir." She let out a relieved sigh and bowed politely to me. She was probably just an elementary school student, but I was impressed by how composed she was. "This happens sometimes. I'll be fine if I rest a little." She tried to reassure me, but her face was still pale. "Your mom and dad know about this, right? You're going to the hospital, right?" "Yeah, I'm okay." She lowered her gaze slightly, her response hesitant and unclear. "Where's your house? I should take you home because you might need help." Before prying any further, I needed to get her to a safe place. Gently supporting her shoulder, I spoke to her calmly. "It's not safe to stay here. Let's go home first. Don't worry, you don't have to walk if you're feeling weak." She gave a small nod and I pulled out my phone. I had planned to arrive early at the meeting to prepare, but if I took her home now, I was definitely going to be late. I immediately contacted the client. "I'm sorry, I've run into a bit of trouble. I'll be about 10 minutes late." They sounded surprised by the sudden notice, but after a brief explanation, they replied, "Understood, please take care on your way." However, as I walked slowly, making sure the girl could rest along the way, I realized that 10 minutes wouldn't be enough. I was going to be much later than expected. Every glance at my watch made my anxiety grow, but I couldn't just leave her to walk on her own. "Let's take a short break. If you start feeling worse, don't hesitate to tell me, okay?" The girl nodded slightly, looking apologetic. "Yeah," she murmured. In the end, I walked the girl to her front door and made sure she went inside safely. Then, I took out my phone and contacted the client again, only for them to respond regretfully, "Actually, we have a packed schedule after this. Let's reschedule for another day." It was an important business meeting, and thinking about the trouble I had caused them made my chest tighten. I sighed. Standing on the busy street, I let out a deep, heavy breath. As soon as I got back to the office, Robert unleashed his fury upon me. "Michael, you're fired." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "What? Wait, why? Fired?" I was so stunned that the words just tumbled out. After all, I'd never heard of anyone being fired for being late just once. "Why?" "Because you completely botched an important business deal, that's why. You caused massive trouble for the client and damaged the company's reputation. We don't need someone like that here." Robert's furious voice echoed through the office. The employees around us started murmuring, stealing glances in my direction. "Wait, I didn't completely miss the meeting. I was just late." I raised my voice, trying to explain, but Robert's sharp glare didn't waver. He stepped closer, nostrils flaring. "Late? Too late is what it was. In the business world, timing is everything. and you threw that away. That makes you unfit to be a professional." A cold sweat ran down my back. "You're just starting unnecessary projects to get on Ms. Reynolds' good side and make yourself stand out, disrupting both the research and sales departments, and on top of that, all you do is throw around big ideas that will never happen. Anyone can come up with ideas, but the ones who truly matter are those who can turn them into reality. And do you even realize that everything you're doing is nothing more than a pipe dream?" For a moment, anger surged inside me. I had proposed numerous new projects and technological advancements. Some of them had failed to materialize. But the one constantly blocking those proposals had been Robert himself. He always found reasons to reject my proposals, saying new developments were too costly or didn't fit the company's structure. Yet now he was pinning all the blame on me alone, and the sheer unfairness of it was unbearable. But before I could argue back, the sheer shock of the situation hit me, leaving me at a loss for words. "I know you're desperate to stay on Ms. Reynolds' good side, but if you can't even handle one business negotiation properly, we don't need you here. Write your resignation letter now." His harsh words felt like a physical blow, shattering something inside me. This can't be happening. I was just... My voice trembled, my vision blurred. I knew I had inconvenienced the client. But being fired over a single delay, it was too cruel, too unreasonable. I glanced around, but all the employees avoided my gaze, looking uncomfortable. Not a single person seemed willing to speak up for me. "I understand." The words barely came out as I swallowed the bitter reality. I clenched my lips to hold back my frustration. But fighting back here wouldn't change anything because Robert had already made up his mind. In the cold, suffocating silence of the office, I packed up my desk and quietly left Westwood Technologies behind. The next morning, I wandered the streets, crushed by despair. The image of Robert firing me played over and over in my mind. I had never felt so powerless in my entire career. As I drowned in my own thoughts, a small, familiar figure appeared before me. "Hey, sir, what are you doing here?" When I looked up, the girl I had helped yesterday was peering up at me. I instinctively widened my eyes. I never expected to run into her here. She still looked a little pale, but compared to yesterday, she seemed slightly better. "Nah, I'm not doing anything, just wandering around." I tried to brush it off, but deep down, I wanted to say, I'm unemployed now. The thought of a grown man, well past 30, throwing away his career over something like this filled me with overwhelming self-loathing. But sir, what about work? Don't you need to go to your company?" Her innocent question, purely out of childlike curiosity, felt like a weight pressing down on my chest. "Well, it's kind of like I'm on a break right now. Anyway, are you feeling okay today? What about school?" I studied her expression as I spoke. She lowered her head slightly. "I couldn't go to school again today, but I feel a little better now, so I went for a walk." At that moment, my phone suddenly vibrated in my pocket. When I checked the screen, my breath caught. It was Catherine. She had been calling over and over, relentlessly. For a moment, I averted my eyes from the screen. What was I supposed to say to her now after being thrown out of the company? But there was no point in running away. I braced myself and answered the call, only to be met with an exasperated, almost panicked voice. "Michael, why didn't you show up to the meeting today?" You were supposed to lead the discussion with the clients, and then I heard you were completely unreachable. I was freaking out. Swallowing down my frustration, I answered bitterly. I'm sorry. The truth is, I got fired. Robert let me go because I was late for the meeting yesterday. What? No way. I haven't heard anything about that. Is Robert making that decision on his own? For a brief moment, her voice seemed to tremble. Hearing that made my chest tighten. After all, this sudden dismissal made no sense to me either. As I listened, I glanced at the girl beside me and noticed that her complexion had worsened. Sorry, Catherine, something urgent just came up. I'll call you back later. Prioritizing the girl's condition, I quickly ended the call. Are you okay? I crouched down to check on her, and she looked up at me with worried eyes. Sir, wasn't that an important call? It's fine. You should head home. I'll walk you back. Supporting her gently, I started leading her toward her house. But when we reached the front door, an unexpected sight left me speechless. Catherine herself was standing there. Her eyes widened in shock, clearly not expecting to see me here either. Mom, sorry, I'm late again. I was too stunned to speak. The girl just called Catherine Mom. My mind went completely blank and I couldn't process what was happening. Michael, come inside. We need to talk. Noticing my confusion, Catherine spoke in a calm but firm voice. We moved from the entrance to the living room where the girl, looking a bit tired, settled onto the sofa. This is Cheryl. She's my relative's daughter. Due to certain circumstances, I took her in and have been raising her for a while now. As she spoke, Catherine gently ran her fingers through Cheryl's hair. She explained that Cheryl's parents had both passed away in recent years, leaving their extended family struggling to figure out what to do. Initially, another relative had planned to take care of her, but due to financial and personal issues, they couldn't provide the necessary support. In the end, Catherine decided to take her in. As her closest blood relative, I couldn't just ignore her, and I've always loved kids. Of course, it hasn't been easy, but nothing makes me happier than seeing Cheryl smile. As she spoke, Catherine gazed at Cheryl with quiet affection. There was a deep sense of determination and love in her gentle gaze. Sir, you knew my mom? Cheryl looked up at me with a mixture of relief and embarrassment. Seeing the concern in her eyes, I let out a small, wry smile. Have a seat. Catherine gestured toward the living room table as she spoke. I sat down without hesitation. Michael, I want you to answer honestly. The reason you were late for the business meeting yesterday was something to do with Cheryl? I glanced at Cheryl, who lowered her gaze. Sitting up straight, I turned my attention back to Catherine. Yes, I found her yesterday struggling on the street. She was clutching her chest and looked like she was in serious pain, so I just couldn't ignore her. As I explained, Catherine's expression grew increasingly tense. Cheryl, you collapsed again? Why didn't you tell me? You have to let me know when these things happen. I'm sorry, but he helped me, so I'm okay. Cheryl's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Seeing her like that was heartbreaking, and I felt a tight pain in my chest. You're going back to the hospital. You need to get a proper checkup. Watching Catherine and Cheryl interact, I realized that Cheryl must have been suffering from a serious illness. I hesitated for a moment before asking. Does Cheryl have a chronic condition? Yes, she has a congenital heart disease. She may need regular surgeries in the future. Catherine lowered her gaze slightly as she answered. At that, Cheryl looked straight at me and shook her head. I'm okay. You don't have to worry. Mom is already busy enough. Seeing her tiny frame trying so hard to act strong was heartbreaking, yet her determination came through clearly. Once again, I felt powerless, frustrated by my inability to do anything for her. As the conversation settled, Catherine placed both hands on the table and turned to face me. Michael, is it really true that you were fired just for being late to the meeting yesterday? That's absurd. This is a serious issue for the company. Yes, but Robert made the decision on the spot, and no matter how much I tried to explain, he wouldn't listen. At my words, Catherine let out a sharp breath. I could see clear anger flicker across her face. There's no way that's acceptable. I need to get to the bottom of this. Tomorrow, we're going to the company together. I'll confront Robert myself. I hesitated for a moment. I had already been fired, so what kind of face was I supposed to make when I walked into the company again? But there was no hesitation in Catherine's expression, only unwavering resolve. In the end, I could only nod. The next day, I walked into the company with Catherine by my side. My steps were heavy and my chest ached with anxiety. But as I glanced at Catherine's firm, confident expression, a strange sense of courage began to rise within me. The moment we stepped into the entrance, all eyes turned toward us. Call Robert. As we arrived at another department, Catherine instructed a nearby employee. Before long, Robert appeared. He shot me a sharp glare as I stood beside Catherine. But just as quickly, he looked away. Ms. Reynolds, what brings you here? I thought you had an important meeting today. His dismissive tone, as if he were trying to pretend I wasn't even there, made my blood boil. I clenched my fists and swallowed my anger as Catherine confronted him head-on. What's going on, Robert? I was never informed about Michael's dismissal. I want an explanation. Well, he resigned voluntarily. Robert twisted his lips into a smirk as he spoke. I was stunned. The sheer absurdity of his words left me speechless. That's not true. I never said that. I raised my voice in protest, and the surrounding employees murmured in response. Catherine stepped forward. Robert, I need to confirm something with you. She let out a small sigh before continuing. Michael was late because he stopped to help a little girl who had collapsed on the street. This was his first time ever being late for a business meeting. And yet, you're telling me that a single instance of tardiness was enough to fire him? No matter how important work is, can such an extreme decision really be justified? She fixed a sharp gaze on Robert. The atmosphere in the office instantly became tense, and the employees around us fell into an uneasy silence. And that's not all. Michael holds a key patent for our company. Did you even consider that before deciding to fire him? Because frankly, I find it hard to believe that one instance of being late is the real reason behind your decision. Her voice carried an unmistakable challenge. Robert furrowed his brows, momentarily taken aback. A patent? At his question, Catherine took a small breath. The tense atmosphere in the office grew even heavier. Yes, the patent he holds is directly tied to a product that accounts for nearly 70% of our company's revenue. It integrates sensor technology with AI analysis, and it has drawn significant interest from clients both domestically and internationally. Our devices incorporate this technology, and a substantial part of our revenue comes from licensing it. Robert's expression hardened. It was clear that he had no idea. This project started as a collaboration with the research department, but ultimately, it was Michael's ideas and expertise that led to the patent. Of course, the final development was a team effort, but without him, this success wouldn't have been possible. This patent is an essential asset to our company. And yet, you fired the person responsible for it over a single late arrival. Catherine's frustration seeped into her final words. I wasn't informed about any of this. Robert's voice was subdued, lacking its usual force. Some of our ongoing projects are still under review with legal and development, so not everything has been widely shared internally. But that doesn't excuse firing him without even looking into his contributions. That's beyond reckless for someone in your position. As Catherine spoke with a sharp gaze, Robert faltered, clenching his teeth and lowering his eyes. Even if he hadn't known, the severity of the situation was undeniable. Enough. We'll take this to the executive board. There's no way I, as president, will allow a valuable employee to be dismissed like this. Michael's termination is completely void. Catherine's resolute words sent an icy chill through the office. The employees watched in tense silence as Robert remained standing there, his expression bitter, unable to say a word. Afterward, everyone dispersed and the office gradually regained its usual atmosphere. I was called into the conference room. Inside, Catherine stood alone. Unlike her usual commanding presence, she seemed somewhat lonely. I'm sorry, Michael. She bowed her head slightly, her voice soft. I instinctively held my breath. I never imagined she would apologize so openly. No, if anything, I caused trouble. She shook her head before I could finish. No, you're not at fault. The real issue was Robert overstepping his authority and firing you over something so trivial. I completely disagree with his decision, and I fully intend to reinstate you. But... Her voice wavered slightly. She pressed her lips together as if trying to contain her frustration. To be honest, I don't have that much authority yet. Even as president, reinstating someone who has been officially terminated requires board approval. And while I've been entrusted with running the company as the second-generation president, I still don't have full control and can't completely ignore the influence of the executives who have been here since my father's time. I see. As I muttered those words, Catherine bit her lip in frustration. The reality that she couldn't disregard the board members who had been there since her father's time was a clear reminder of the immense weight she carried as the second-generation president. Please, don't let this weigh on you. Catherine, you're already doing an incredible job. Even now, you're going out of your way to fight for me. Thank you. Honestly, ever since I became president, I've felt like I've just been spinning my wheels, getting nowhere. But watching you carefully listen to the research and sales teams made me realize that every single employee plays a vital role in supporting this company. Her voice trembled slightly, and I instinctively held my breath. I've always doubted whether I was really suited to be a second-generation president, but every time you passionately suggested ways to improve the company, it made me think, maybe I can do this, and little by little, I've started to feel like I can stand on my own. So truly, thank you. Her eyes were filled with both the strength of someone who had overcome struggles and the determination to keep moving forward. I felt my heart skip a beat, my pulse pounding in my chest. If you need me, Catherine, I feel like I can overcome any obstacle. Besides, I want to help make Westwood Technologies a better company just as much as you do." The words felt embarrassingly grand even to myself, but Catherine chuckled softly. Seeing her smile, my earlier frustration and anger melted away like they had never been there. "Thank you. That really means a lot to me. I'm sorry, I don't know how the board meeting will turn out, but I will bring you back no matter what. It may be tough for now, but please trust me." After saying that, she hesitated for just a moment before gently touching my hand. Even through the sleeve of my suit, the warmth of her touch burned itself into my memory. "I'll wait. No matter what the outcome is, I trust you, Catherine." She slowly pulled her hand away, offering a faint yet lingering smile. Catherine was always the confident, fearless leader charging ahead of everyone. But right now, she was letting herself lean on me, even if just a little, and that made me inexplicably happy. As I left the conference room, she bowed deeply once more and whispered, "Thank you." Watching her from behind, I let out a quiet breath. A few days later, the board meeting took place. I was called in as a witness, and the moment I stepped through the doors, I felt the heavy tension in the air pressing down on me. The directors sat around the circular table with Catherine seated calmly at the center. Across from her was Robert. When our eyes met, she gave me a small nod, but her expression remained rigid. The meeting began, and Robert was the first to argue for the validity of my dismissal. I simply enforced company policy and held an employee accountable for their actions. To call that unfair is completely inappropriate. In response to his statement, Catherine countered, arguing that firing someone immediately over a single late arrival is far too extreme. However, some of the senior board members sided with Robert, arguing that damaging the company's reputation cannot be ignored. There's no doubt that his patents and technology are major assets to the company. However, no matter how talented someone is, a business cannot allow disorderly conduct. Showing favoritism to a single employee could set a dangerous precedent and disrupt the company's structure. As more voices echoed similar opinions, Catherine found herself struggling to turn the tide. I had no choice but to remain silent, but watching it unfold was incredibly frustrating. "Excuse me, but if I may." I was just about to speak up when... Bang! The door to the meeting room swung open violently, and a secretary rushed inside. "Ma Reynolds, we have a situation. We received an emergency call that Cheryl just collapsed." For a moment, everything froze. "What?" Catherine stared at Rose in disbelief. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. "We don't have full details yet, but she was taken to the hospital by ambulance. Her breathing was erratic, and she hasn't regained consciousness." The moment those words hit, Catherine pushed back her chair and shot to her feet. "Michael, let's go." Without waiting for a response, she bolted out of the room. I was momentarily stunned, but quickly snapped out of it and ran after her. "Ms. Reynolds, the meeting isn't over." Someone called out to stop her, but Catherine was already far ahead. I had no choice but to run after her. Bursting out of the boardroom, Catherine and I jumped into a car and sped toward the hospital. My mind was blank, and I had no room to think about what was going to happen with the board meeting. Right now, all I cared about was Cheryl. As soon as we arrived at the hospital, we rushed to the reception desk, gave her name, and completed the visitation procedures. In front of the emergency treatment room, several nurses moved frantically back and forth. Where's Cheryl? She's my relative. When Catherine pressed the nurse for information, a doctor stepped forward from the back. His name was Dar Nelson. Catherine, correct? Your child's condition is unstable, and we are doing everything we can to treat her right now. I understand she has a pre-existing heart condition, but this episode was particularly severe and we cannot afford to take any risks. Catherine's face turned pale and she instinctively reached out to steady herself against the wall. My own heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. There is an irregularity in her heart function, and we need to determine the cause as quickly as possible. But with our current equipment, obtaining real-time data in detail takes time. I'm sorry, but for now, we have no choice but to monitor her condition. Dar Nelson's words weighed heavily on us. Then, suddenly, an idea flashed in my mind, the prototype device we had developed with the research team. It was a non-invasive monitoring system capable of detecting heart rate and blood flow irregularities without placing stress on the patient's body. Dar Nelson, I have a request. We have a prototype device that can monitor heart and vascular conditions in real time. It hasn't been officially approved yet, but if the situation is critical, could we use it? The doctor narrowed his eyes slightly, considering my suggestion. A prototype? Can you guarantee its safety? The design ensures minimal risk to the patient. It uses low-power ultrasound combined with sensors to accurately track blood flow and heart rate. While the data isn't extensive yet, it has the potential to detect abnormalities much faster than conventional equipment. Catherine, who had been listening intently, suddenly looked up. Wait, is this the same device you submitted as a new proposal to the company? Yes, I had meant to present it to you properly, but Robert dismissed it before I had the chance. However, I believe I shared some of the initial documentation with you. I remember. If that device works, it could detect Cheryl's condition in time. Without hesitation, Catherine turned to the medical team and bowed deeply. Dar Nelson, as a representative of our development team, I take full responsibility. Please, allow us to use the prototype. The doctor studied Catherine's determined expression, then sighed and gave a small nod. Given the circumstances, I understand your desire to explore every possible option. We will try it under strict conditions, but if anything seems off, we will stop immediately. Thank you. We quickly contacted the research team and had the device delivered to the hospital. Since it was not officially approved, the entire responsibility for its use fell on us. But that didn't matter. If there was even the slightest chance of saving Cheryl, we had to take it. Once the device was set up, Dar Nelson and the nurses carefully began monitoring Cheryl's heart and blood flow patterns. The screen displayed her irregular heart rhythms in real time, providing far more detail than conventional equipment. There it is, the abnormal blood flow pattern. This level of detail is normally impossible to capture with standard devices, but this one picks it up clearly. Dar Nelson, visibly excited, began issuing rapid instructions while the nurses moved swiftly to respond. As the treatment progressed, Cheryl's breathing gradually stabilized and the monitor readings steadily returned to normal. Just a little more, stay focused. As everyone watched with hopeful anticipation, there were a few tense moments, but in the end, Cheryl's heart rate returned to a normal range, and Dar Nelson let out a relieved sigh. She's out of immediate danger. She still needs monitoring, but for now, we've overcome the worst. At that moment, silent tears slipped down Catherine's cheeks. I felt the tension drain from my body as I leaned against the wall. After confirming that Cheryl's condition was stable, I stepped out of the treatment room and took a deep breath. Thank you, Michael. You really saved her. Catherine's voice trembled as she grasped my arm. I couldn't find the right words to say, so I simply nodded. The realization that Cheryl's condition had stabilized filled me with overwhelming relief and joy. It was ironic that the device Robert had once rejected ended up playing a crucial role in saving a life, but despite that, I felt a deep certainty growing within me that this technology had real value. A few days passed. Cheryl had made it through the crisis and was now resting peacefully in her hospital bed. Catherine, finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, turned her attention back to resuming the board meeting and reorganizing the company's internal structure. However, just as things started to settle, a new issue arose. My unauthorized use of an unapproved prototype in a hospital setting had escalated into a major controversy. One morning, Robert called out to me in a harsh tone, "Hey, get over here." He led me into the boardroom, and the moment the door slammed shut with a loud bang, the atmosphere turned ice cold. Robert pulled a document from his chest pocket and smacked it onto the table. "You went ahead and used an unapproved prototype without permission, huh? And on top of that, you're practically on the verge of leaving, yet you had the audacity to act as if you still represent this company? Just how thick-skinned are you?" His voice was filled with anger, sharp like a finely honed blade. I opened my mouth to argue, but before I could speak, Robert continued. "So you used an unapproved prototype without permission. If something happened, how would you take a responsibility for that? How much would you make me feel disgusted?" A tremor ran through the table as Robert slammed his fist against it, and I noticed several executives around the room grimacing. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice despite the tension that threatened to shake it. I never intended to go against company policy. Cheryl's condition was critical, and I only proceeded with the doctor's approval. Stop making excuses. Robert's furious voice echoed through the room. His frustration erupted like an uncontrollable force, and the sheer intensity in his glare made him look almost predatory. You claim the doctor approved it, but that doesn't change the fact that the company itself never authorized the device. If something had gone wrong, this wouldn't just be a matter of the company's reputation, and it would be a matter of life and death. Do you even understand the ethical responsibility you carry as an engineer? A heavy silence filled the room before Robert scoffed and sneered. Fixing his gaze on me, he continued. You were already a problem, skipping an important business meeting, pushing reckless proposals, and constantly disrupting the company's structure. The only reason you got away with it was because Catherine spoiled you. You really think you're that valuable? His one-sided accusations stirred a deep frustration inside me. But when I tried to speak, the words caught in my throat. It's all my responsibility. As I finally forced the words out, Robert slammed his hand against the table once again, his intense fury now fully unleashed. Then take responsibility. Word is, you were planning to leave anyway. Pack your things and get out. If it gets out that an unauthorized device was used without company approval, the damage to our reputation will be enormous. We don't need you stirring up more chaos. The moment felt like a public execution, but before I could process it further, the door suddenly burst open. Standing there, visibly shaken, was Catherine. Robert, wait, that's two. However, Robert raised his hand to cut her off and curtly responded, Ms. Reynolds, could you save this for later? Right now, I'm handling this matter as the directly involved party. His face was a mixture of anger and smug satisfaction, his breath heavy with self-righteousness. But he had my approval. Ms. Reynolds, don't you see the problem here? He took an unapproved device and used it in a life or death situation. Do you realize the risk this company is facing? It was necessary to save Cheryl. If that were the case, we would have handled it properly through the company. But you two bypassed the process entirely. That is an undeniable fact. Catherine clenched her jaw, lowering her gaze. Sensing her hesitation, Robert pressed on. In the end, you acted under Ms. Reynolds' protection, indulging in your own self-righteousness. What matters isn't just the result. It's the procedure and the safety measures in place. You ignored both. That's all there is to it. Get out of here. You're a nuisance. His words carried a cold finality, making the air in the room feel razor-sharp. Catherine, unable to hold back any longer, shouted, "You can't say that. If he hadn't been there, Cheryl was." But I shook my head slightly, stopping her. Either way, with Robert this enraged, there was no room for discussion. I didn't want to make Catherine suffer any more than she already had. I understand. I take full responsibility. I won't continue causing trouble for the company. I'll leave. The moment I said those words, Catherine's eyes welled up with tears. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but then she bit her trembling lip, swallowing her words. Robert smirked in victory, slamming his documents onto the table before pushing his chair back. That settles it. I've handled the issue. Ms. Reynolds, you have no further objections, correct? Catherine looked down, her frustration clear, but she didn't speak. At that moment, the door suddenly swung open again. This is bad. Look at the news. Matthew from the General Affairs Department wiped the sweat from his forehead as he hurriedly grabbed the remote and switched on the TV. On the screen, a shocking headline appeared, "Medical device engineer who saved a child forced out of the company." What is this? Robert stared at the screen in stunned disbelief. A serious-looking commentator continued speaking in the news studio. The life-saving prototype was developed by Michael Carter, an engineer at the major corporation Westwood Technologies. However, new reports indicate that he is being unfairly dismissed due to internal company disputes and alleged abuse of power by senior management. Sources claim that power struggles within the company may be behind his forced resignation. Who leaked this to the media? Robert's face turned crimson as he lunged toward the TV screen, his fury barely contained. Behind him, Catherine, who had been on the verge of tears moments ago, now stood frozen, staring in disbelief at the broadcast. The screen prominently displayed a contrast: the unauthorized device that saved a little girl's life and the brilliant engineer who developed it. On top of that, a caption ran across the screen: "A department head is pressuring this engineer out of the company." This looks like our development team couldn't stand by and watch anymore. They reached out to the media themselves. Everything's been exposed. The unauthorized technology, Robert's obstruction, and all of it. Matthew, still looking apologetic, lowered his gaze as he explained. Robert's shoulders trembled with rage, his face growing even redder. This is outrageous. Leaking internal affairs to the press? This is outright betrayal. Who did this? I won't forgive them. At that moment, a voice rang out from behind. Ryan, one of my colleagues from the development team who had supported me, stood there with a determined expression, as if he had made up his mind. It was us, Robert. We couldn't just stand by and watch anymore. You backed Michael into a corner, and worse, the company refused to acknowledge the value of that device. So we did what we had to do. We made sure the world knew about it. What did you say? Robert's expression contorted with rage, his voice rising even higher. But Ryan didn't back down. Your methods are wrong. Do you even understand how revolutionary that device is? Do you realize how many lives it could save? The upper management was blind to its potential, and instead of supporting innovation, they rejected it outright. And then, to top it off, you tried to fire the person responsible for it? That's beyond unacceptable. Robert faltered for a brief moment, clearly caught off guard by Ryan's words. However, he immediately shouted, his lips trembling with rage, "Are you kidding me? Leaking information without my approval is an act of complete betrayal. You'd better be ready for the consequences. I won't let this slide." The employees around us held their breath, tension gripping the entire room. But Ryan stood firm, locking eyes with Robert without a hint of fear. Behind him, several members of the development team had also stepped forward, their hands clenched into fists. That's fine. If we have to face the consequences, so be it. But we refuse to let Michael take the fall alone. From the very beginning, Catherine said she wanted to build a company that prioritizes saving lives. That's the vision we've all been working toward. We won't let corporate politics erase everything we fought for. Robert's face turned an even deeper shade of red. He opened his mouth to retaliate, but no words came out. The room had already turned against him. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I wanted to tell everyone to calm down, but I couldn't get the words out. Just then, I felt a gentle tug on my sleeve. Turning around, I saw Catherine standing beside me. She gave me a small nod, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, yet her smile was warm. It's okay. You're not alone. Your work, your ideas, and the people who believe in you. They're all right here. When I heard Catherine's voice, my chest tightened. A mix of confusion and gratitude swirled inside me, leaving me at a loss for words. Meanwhile, the TV screen continued flashing the headline about the engineer who saved a child but was now facing termination. Even in a changing corporate world with this level of exposure, there was no way the company could cover this up. Damn it! Finally unable to contain his frustration, Robert grabbed the documents and threw them onto the table in a fit of rage. His face was flushed red, a mix of anger and humiliation boiling over. The employees, though silent, instinctively stepped back, creating space between themselves and him. Noticing their reaction, Robert let out a sharp exhale, turned on his heel, and stormed out of the office. A heavy silence remained in the room, no one daring to speak. However, within that silence, I could clearly feel a distinct emotion, a quiet but growing determination among everyone. A shared resolve that they would no longer allow Robert to do as he pleased. This moment would mark a turning point, setting the company's fate into motion toward a significant change. Along with my uncertainty, a strong determination ignited deep within me as I thought, this is the only chance to act. The next day, the company began to shift rapidly. News about Robert's actions spread even further, reaching online platforms and newspapers. Headlines branded him as the man who tried to kill life-saving technology. The controversy even started making waves in international media, with reports highlighting how a skilled engineer in Japan was being forced out due to corporate politics. Naturally, public backlash against Robert intensified, both inside and outside the company. He started avoiding public spaces, no longer carrying himself with the same arrogant authority. More than anything, the employees made their stance clear. Whenever Robert entered a room, people averted their gaze or created an obvious wall of silence. In the end, Robert was placed on suspension under the pretense of causing trouble for the company and perhaps finding it difficult to return. He voluntarily submitted his resignation and disappeared. The man who had once been praised as a brilliant executive from a foreign firm left quietly, carrying his belongings as he slipped out of the office unnoticed. Not a single person wished him farewell. Thanks to Catherine's strong support and the backing of the development team and other employees, I was reinstated under the pretense of a reevaluation. In fact, instead of simply returning to my previous position, I was given even greater freedom and responsibility. Michael, I want you to lead the new business team. Everyone values your skills and creativity highly, and I rely on you as well. As Catherine said this, her smile was stronger than before, yet somehow gentler. It was clear that after the Robert incident, she had resolved to rebuild the company from the ground up. Even the veteran board members, shaken by recent events, began to realize that fostering innovative employees was essential for the company's future. As a result, the company's performance soared at an unprecedented pace. New product licensing deals were secured one after another, attracting attention not just domestically but from international medical institutions as well. The dramatic story of the technology that saved a little girl had already been widely covered in the media, propelling Westwood Technologies into the spotlight as an innovative medical venture. One day, I found myself stopping in a familiar hallway. It was the same place where Robert used to stand, exerting his authority over everyone. But now employees were chatting and exchanging smiles, the atmosphere open and welcoming. I don't think he intended for things to turn out this way from the start, but in the end, wielding power like that didn't benefit anyone. I murmured. A brief wave of complex emotions washed over me, but I quickly pushed them aside as I recalled Catherine's smile and the unwavering support of my colleagues. Right now, my mission was clear to do my best in this new environment. With that determination in mind, I left the development floor and stepped toward the elevator. Suddenly, I heard a high-pitched voice call out, "Michael." Before I could react, a small figure leaped at me. "Wait, Cheryl? Are you already well enough to be out of the hospital?" I hurriedly caught her, and Cheryl grinned as if nothing had happened. Though her long hospital stay had left her physically frail, her face was much more lively than before. "Yep, I'm totally fine now. The doctors let me out for rehabilitation today, so I came to the office with Mom." Her eyes sparkled as she eagerly looked around. A moment later, Catherine appeared, slightly out of breath, her shoulders rising and falling. "Honestly, you always take off running so suddenly. Sorry, Michael. She must have startled you." Catherine apologized as she quickly held onto Cheryl's shoulders, looking slightly flustered. She took a deep breath and wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "No worries. More than anything, I'm just happy to see you looking so energetic, Cheryl." I met Cheryl's gaze and smiled. Though she was still physically frail, her complexion was much healthier than before. Seeing her innocent, childlike smile filled me with a deep sense of relief. We were in the company's lounge near the entrance. There were white tables and sofas neatly arranged. With a small backpack on her shoulders, Cheryl looked around curiously, like a child on an exciting adventure exploring the office. "This is where you work, Michael? It's so big." Seeing Cheryl's eyes filled with curiosity, I couldn't help but smile as well. "That's right. A lot of people work here. Over there is the reception area, that's the meeting room, and down that hall is the research lab." Just as I was getting carried away explaining, Cheryl stepped closer and whispered softly, "Hey, you and Mom seem way closer than before." Huh? I froze for a moment, confused. Cheryl giggled mischievously and winked. Because the other day, Mom said, I can keep going because Michael is by my side. Hey, Cheryl. Flustered, I stammered while Catherine, standing beside me, turned bright red and tried to hide her face with her hands. But even through her fingers, I could see the hint of a smile forming. Stop saying weird things. Michael is busy with work. Her voice was slightly higher than usual, as if she were trying to cover up her embarrassment. Cheryl giggled mischievously. But it's true, she insisted with complete innocence. Hey, when I get better, let's go somewhere together. Just the three of us, Mom, you, and me. We could go to an amusement park or an aquarium. Yeah, if we can match our schedules, we might be able to go. As I said that, Catherine gave a small, secretive nod, though she still looked a bit flustered, her gaze lowered in embarrassment. Really? You'll take me? It's a promise, Elle. Cheryl pulled a small notebook from her backpack and showed me a page with the words, "Places to go together," scribbled in childlike handwriting. The list was filled with adorable wishes like eat something sweet and see the ocean. You have to keep your promise. Even if Mom is busy, I know she'll take a break if you invite her. Hey, Cheryl. Haha. Well, she's not wrong. Catherine, you do need a break every once in a while. Seeing my awkward smile, Cheryl beamed with joy. Her smile was so bright and full of life that it was hard to believe she had been unwell not long ago. You're right. I'd love to spend more time with both of you. Catherine let out a soft sigh, looking back and forth between us with a gentle smile. The redness in her cheeks from earlier had finally started to fade. It settled then. Cheryl clapped her hands together excitedly, radiating pure joy. Watching her, I felt an indescribable sense of peace. The company had changed drastically, but because of that, we now had the chance to share this moment of laughter. When I chose not to ignore Cheryl collapsing on the street that day, I hadn't just saved her life, and I had unknowingly found a way to reclaim my own career and future. Wanting to help someone else had, in the end, also saved me. By reaching out, by not hesitating to lend a hand, I had earned trust and support from those around me. What truly matters in this world is the warmth of human connections.